Good morning. Let's see if this is better here. Good morning, everyone. Hi, it is Stacy. This is Loving My Veteran, and we are walking in my shoes this morning. Hopefully, I have a better internet connection where I'm a little more stable this hour of the morning. We made it home. For those of you who missed our road trip, part of it is on the page. So we did a little road trip on the page, where you get to experience what it's like traveling with the veteran. That was always exciting. I'm getting some coffee, kind of get myself together. Good morning, Pam. So, what does this stupid thing say? Please set the frame rate. Oh, it says my frame rate is too low, whatever that means. So hopefully this isn't all strange, but we'll figure that out later. Okay, we'll deal with that in a little bit. So, I want to say good morning. Do not forget, y'all, tonight we do Let's Talk. The link is on the page. It is on an event. Oh, we were cute and giddy. We're always that way. We didn't have to pick up the chickens. We got all the chickens are accounted for. I'm so excited. So we got home. Everything is good. Chickens are accounted for. Life is good. All right, let me see if I can get this stuff together here. This is like driving me nuts. All right. So, let's talk about, we were talking about boundaries, and we are talking about when you don't set the boundaries correctly and enforce those boundaries, you enable. And that is never a good thing. So, we need to. Oh, yes, I did get that chicken. Now, I'm sorry, I'm like on a totally different thing. I thought you were talking about my chickens that were all over the house. Yes, I got chicken finally on the way home, and it was all great. So life was good. We even have the chickens all accounted for this morning. They're all accounted for, the ones that we left here that the neighbor watched. Don't forget, y'all, we have Let's Talk tonight. Zoom links to the event on the page, so please join us then. We always have a lot of fun. It is 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. You can join anytime. Just pop in and enjoy with us. Boundaries. We talked about them yesterday, that boundaries turn into enabling. And then what happens from that next point is once our boundaries turn into, we set our boundaries and we don't do them well. And when we don't stick to our boundaries, then we enable, because we just like, hey, you need to do this, or this is my boundary. Good morning, Damon. This is my boundary. This is the boundary I have set. And when you let people cross that boundary, veterans, friends, family, co-workers, cross that boundary over and over again, that line is not clear. You get frustrated, so you just do something that you set as a boundary, and now it becomes enabling. And enabling is not a good thing. When you enable people, it is never a good situation. Okay, so we have to be very careful when we do that. Let's see if I can fix this dumb thing. It says I'm doing something wrong, so I don't know. I like it the way it used to be. Anyway, so that becomes enabling. And when we enable people over and over and over again, one, we take so much away from them. So understand that when we enable people, and this is a big deal, when we enable people, we take away so much of what we're doing for them. And we don't want to do that. That's not helpful in any situation to do that. You take away their purpose. You take away their meaning. You take away all these things from them when you enable them. And we don't want to do that, because it makes them feel less of a person. But at the same time, we have objectives that have to be met. We have boundaries that have to be met. We have goals that have to be met. We have things that have to happen. People have to be accountable. And when we set those boundaries and say, hey, today you're going to be accountable, and they're not accountable, right? They're not forced to be accountable, then what happens? We end up picking up the slack across the board. We all pick up the slack across the board. And when we do that, we create a bigger problem. And we can't do that. I'm making all kinds of a mess up in here. I don't even know what I'm doing in here. I can't see where I'm at no more. This is nuts. Ugh. I don't want an embedded code. Go back to wherever you belong. I want you to come back to where... I can't see nothing now. I done messed up my whole situation here. Ugh. There. Now, sorry. This is like trying to learn a new thing here, and it's not working for me. Alright. So when we do this, we create all kinds of issues. We take things away from them. We now belittle them. We now don't give them a purpose. Or ourselves, if somebody comes in and tells you to do something and says, hey, you're going to be the one in charge of this today, and all of a sudden you're not the one doing this today, right? What happens? They've taken that away from you, so what happens? And when they do that, you're in this situation that is tough. You feel belittled. You don't feel that you have a purpose. So when you've set your boundaries, hey, you're going to be accountable for this. This is your job. This is what you need to address. I'm no longer doing this. This is a boundary we have. You're not going to yell at me anymore, but you allow it to yell and continue. This just keeps going on and on and on and on and on. We have a problem. And when we do this, good morning, Susan. When we do this over and over and over and over and over again, we are playing and we're moving boundaries so nobody knows exactly where they're expected to be. Because one day the boundary is here, and the next day we may put it up here, and then we may bring it back down to the very bottom, and it fluctuates. So there's no consistency. There's no consistency in the situation. And now we've picked up the slack and we're doing things because they're not holding true to their boundaries, and we're enabling that behavior. We're enabling that situation to go on. And we have to stop doing that. But we all do it. We all do it. People do that. That is human nature. So to get a good situation without the enabling, find your boundary. Start with 1 or 2 or 3 simple boundaries. Set your boundaries, set them firm, and do not move them. Let them know they are accountable not to cross your boundary. And when they cross that boundary, you have the right to back off. I'm playing hormones. I love you. You have a right to back off. If you are engaged in a situation and there's arguing going on and everything gets elevated, you have that right to say, not today. Give me a minute. We're going to cool off. Give me a downtime. We're going to cool off. If they're in your bubble, and I do this a lot with Carl, I get in his bubble when he's in a place. Okay? I need to learn to step back. I remember early on putting my hand, I've said this, he sits on the end of the couch with the arm on one side, and I would come to him and put my hand on the arm and my hand on the back, and he felt trapped, and that was part of his boundary. Do not do that to me. And if I continue to do that, I am in his bubble. So he has to get me out of that bubble that was a trigger for him. That was a physical boundary issue that we had to overcome. I no longer do that. I don't do that. We all have them. Veterans have them. We have them. Learn boundaries from each other and be clear. You know, we have a victory wall. We all talk about our victory wall. Sorry, y'all. We all have our victories hung up on our victory wall, or we should. We've talked about that over and over again. You know, visual things are so stimulating. Create a boundary wall. Literally, you got your victories, you got your things you need to work on. Now I'm asking you to add one more, and I want it where people can see it, where the two of you can see it back and forth. Take Stacy's boundaries, Carl's boundaries. Put your 3 on there. Write them up there. Put them on your little cards, whatever you're writing on, your calendar, your whiteboard, whatever you're writing them on. Write your boundaries. Write your boundaries. When we had the house with big bathtub, I loved to take a bath. I didn't want anybody in my bubble when I took a bath. That was my time for my head to unwind and for me to do me. Don't come in here if I'm taking a bath. Now, if you haven't heard from me in an hour, make sure I haven't drowned, but don't come in there. So on my boundary wall, we don't have a bath anymore. We're fixing to fix that problem. But I would literally write down, if I had my boundary wall, don't come in when I'm taking a bath. Okay, that's a clear boundary. Don't do it. Carl would put, don't block me in on the couch. That's a boundary. Now, I see it. I know what his boundary is. He knows what my boundary is. And we are reminded of that boundary. Because let me tell you what happens when boundaries get out of control. When you don't use them, and then it becomes enabling, right? We enable because we've done it for so long. We enable. So now we've enabled, and when we don't stick to our boundaries, we've enabled them. We do it to each other. We do that for each other, back and forth. Yeah, Michelle says the shower and bath time is a trigger for her PTSD. It's not necessarily a trigger for my PTSD. I just want my space and don't come into my bubble. We all have them, so write them up there. Do 3 boundaries. Get your little note cards. Y'all, these are the greatest things they ever made. They come in neon. I will get Loving My Veteran printed on note cards, and we'll start sending them out if people need them. We need these. You need to learn to live by them. They're important. They are important. They are tools because we are a visual society. We are a visual society. We already know that a huge issue with our veterans is communication. Huge issue. So, you get your boundaries, write them on your boundary wall. Now that boundaries are clear. But remember, if we have a right to set boundaries, guess what? Our veterans have the same right. So everybody set your boundaries. Take 3. Take 3. When you do that and you put them where you can physically see them, now when those boundaries get crossed, you can literally just look at them and say, I screwed up. Or they can say, I screwed up. Or you can remind them as you walk away, look, I need to back off. This is crossing a boundary I set. I just can't do this. It's on my boundary wall. It's on my boundary list. Write them down. Because we think that we set boundaries. And Carl says, he uses the words push. He has his boundaries around him. He has his protection around him. And we've all called it, we jokingly called it, all of us at some point have called it the box of avoidance, right? We've all talked about the file folder of a file box of avoidance, right? Michelle's right. You've got to have mutual respect for one another's boundaries. But if we're not clear in them all the time, or there's too many that are overwhelming, we kind of muddy that a little bit. And the problem that I have, and I think that so many other people have, is we set these boundaries and then we get frustrated because, especially if it's a boundary of something they need to do, we set these boundaries and then something doesn't get accomplished and it's holding everything else up. And so we just go ahead and do it. So now our boundaries are not in stone and they know that they can push those boundaries, so it turns to manipulation. And that's a whole nother subject, and we'll get on that in just a minute. But what I'm going with the avoidance is that Carl had this box, of stuff that he protected. I called it the box of avoidance. And it wasn't necessarily avoidance. It was his personal wall of protection. things that had bothered him in the past. It was his personal protection wall. And now we need to get into that box and slowly start chiseling away at things. So we have to open that and we have to push through it. And it is hard and it is tough. And I've had to do it. I had see Jesus with the ex-husband yesterday. Things I have avoided for 2 years are no longer avoided. That is out on the carpet, done. I'm being so brazen that I'm sending a certified letter today. So let me tell you how brazen I am. I'm proud of that moment because I set that boundary. I said that boundary from day one. It's taken me 2 years to enforce that boundary. So that happens. But I'm not moving that boundary anymore. I've just kind of had the boundary there and I didn't really address it. So we're addressing it because we didn't address that boundary. I let things go. I didn't address the boundary. It created enabling. And that enabling turned to manipulation. Because let me tell you, by human nature, by every nature, everybody knows how, we all find a way to get what we want. Okay, we all find a way to get what we want. Even my chickens find a way to get what they want. I go out on the porch to do a load of laundry, and my chickens all come running up, and they're squawking and they're squawking and they're squawking. And I may have fed them like an hour ago, right? And then I feel sorry for them cute little fuzzy, little furry, feathery things. And I know they're going to spit out eggs, right? So I throw them a cup of scratch. Well, they're so used to me now feeding them scratch that they manipulate me every time I go out there. They come running with their cute little self and their little waddly tails, right? And I feed the chickens. They've learned how to manipulate me to feed them. The dogs do the same thing. They look so cute. They could like be tearing up the trash. And I get mad at them. And then they sit there with their cute little puppy face and go, And I'm like, y'all want a treat? I just picked up all the trash, but do y'all want a treat? They manipulate me. And Carl says it's like good parent, bad parent. It is with me. I'm the good parent. I let them manipulate me. But it came from not setting boundaries. When Mouse misbehaves, the puppy misbehaves, Carl puts him in doggy jail. I don't do that. He does. I don't do that often. So they've learned to manipulate me. They know that. You know, we had a situation too. It was funny. I'm laughing about it. He's livid. We have fire ants out here in South K. We have fire ant granules that go in the yard. Well, I said to Carl, I said, look, we need to put these out. We got fire ants. He goes, okay, I'll do it. And I was sitting out there, and the puppy was outside. I said, Mousy, we got fire ants. Y'all, the next morning, Mouse has done got the bag of the fire ant killer. He didn't eat it. He tore a hole in it and ran around the yard with the fire ant killer and spread a 20-pound bag of fire ant killer all over the yard. I'm like, oh, Mouse, you're so good. You sprayed the fire ant killer all over the yard, right? And Carl's like, Mouse, what'd you get into our stuff for? I'm like, but look at what he did, right? So that becomes manipulation. He did the same thing with the potting soil. I looked at him and said, y'all got to stop digging these holes, right? Got my arms crossed. Y'all have got to stop digging these holes. We need to learn to fill them back in, right? Here goes Mouse the next day with the potting soil. And he runs around with the potting soil. And, of course, he puts expensive potting soil in the hole he's dug. I think they're trying to build me a koi pond or a pool, but I'm not quite sure. But that's what I'm talking about manipulation. So I'm like, oh, you're such a good puppy. You spread the stuff out. What did he do? He crossed a boundary. He got into stuff he wasn't supposed to do. I've let him do it for so long. I thought it was cute, and he manipulated me into thinking it was cute. So when you do not set boundaries and you do not follow those boundaries turn to enabling, because we do that. We all do that. We just got to get stuff done. And sometimes it's just easier to do it ourselves than to have the accountability factor go into our space, right? Sometimes we just deal with it. And then when we have done that for so long, because those boundaries keep moving all over the place and they're not clear, they're not defined, and we keep allowing them to move, now we've turned into enabling, and enabling turns into manipulation. Because by human nature, we try to get what we want. It's human nature. It's human nature. It starts out from the time we're a kid. Whatever ingenious person decided to put the candy by the checkout aisle knew that every parent would buy their child one of those candies sitting there to shut them up because they didn't want to hear them scream. Those marketing people banked on the manipulation of our children to us. They manipulated us into buying our kids candy so they would shut up. That's what they did. That's what happened. That's how it works. And the thing is that as parents, we set boundaries with our kids that said, no, we are not getting candy in the checkout aisle, right? So by the time that's the first thing, they're like, oh, we're going to get candy, right? As you're going into the grocery store. And you're telling them all through the grocery store, no, we're not getting candy at the checkout aisle. I bought this, I bought that. We're not getting that today, right? We say that. And what happens? By the time we have pushed the buggy through the store, wrangled two toddlers through the store, we now get to, I throw fit to the checkout. If mine asks for candy, I know, that's what I'm saying, right? So we do it. So we wrangled the two toddlers through the store with the buggy, with the groceries, all this stuff. Now we're at the checkout aisle, and we don't want them to scream. We don't want them to scream. So what do? We buy them the candy. That is the number one form of manipulation. Marketers, y'all don't think manipulation works? Marketers thrive on that. That's how they do it. They thrive on that. I mean, think about it from every commercial known to man. Coca-Cola, they're sitting there, it's hot, it's summer. They don't show the Coca-Cola commercial with the guy cutting the grass and the hot sweat beads rolling off of him and him drinking the ice cold bottle of Coca-Cola. They don't air that in December. They air that in June and July and August. It's manipulation. And that's what happens. They take our weaknesses and they manipulate us. And that's what happens in every single relationship. It is not necessarily intentional, but it is something that happens because they know they get a desired result. Okay? You understand what I'm saying? They get that desired result. And that's what happens. But we all do it. So it all stems back to this domino effect. You know, people say to me, Stacy, how do you set boundaries? Stacy, how do you stop the manipulation? Stacy, how do we stop the enabling? Stacy, how do we get them to stop playing the video games? Stacy, how do we do this? Can I communicate effectively? How come he just sits on the couch? How come they do this? How come they do that? It is all a total picture domino effect that plays together. Okay? It plays together. Boundaries. You have to be clear in communication. So that's what I'm telling you. We got our victory wall now. We got our challenge stuff of what we got to take that are our failures and move them to victories. And now you start adding in the simple things of boundaries. And it is written, it is clear, and it is concise. Now communication isn't a problem. You've got it. They can read it. You can read it. You can remind yourself. You can see their boundaries. They can see your boundaries. You now have this mutual respect for the boundaries that are on the wall. I mean, I don't. Somebody else says, "Oh, you want to wallpaper your house?" No, I don't need to wallpaper my house. Okay. No, Sarah. If he says he'll do the dishes at 3 p.m. and by 8 p.m. you can't look at him anymore, Call him out and do it. Or do what I'm telling you. This is great. Put them all in a dishpan and set them next to him. Let it go. You have to let that go, because what did you just do when he said he'll do the dishes and you did them anyway? Guess what? He told you what you wanted to hear, that he'd do the dishes at 3 o'clock, and at 8 o'clock you couldn't look at him anymore, so you did the dishes. He knew he didn't have to. He just manipulated you into doing the dishes. See how simple that was? That's what happens. Clear. Boundaries, write them. Use them. Utilize them. Stick to them. And sticking to the boundaries, when you set a boundary, is equally as hard for you to do as it is for them to follow. Okay? It is equally, I'm going back to this again, when we set a boundary, it is equally as hard for us to do, to maintain, as it is for them not to cross that boundary. It is equally as hard. For those of you who have kids, right? And, you know, I can remember being mad at my kids as they got older. And I grounded them. Okay, you can't watch TV for a week. They're brats. Okay, that TV time, I was like an idiot. Because that TV time sometimes was my half an hour of quiet time. That TV time was my half an hour of quiet time. And I just told my children, you can't watch TV for a week. And now I just took out my half an hour of quiet time. I wasn't real bright. I can remember as they became teenagers, grounding them from the car. You're not driving anywhere for a month. Yeah, well, guess who had to go pick them up from ball practice? Me. So when you set that boundary, which was the same thing as restricting my kids, it is, right, you think about it as punishing yourself, but you're not really. You're trying to set those guidelines. But when you set those boundaries for yourself, you can't move them. Because if you kept giving in to your children when you took away their TV or you took away their driving the car, yes, it was hard, and yes, it was uncomfortable for you, but they knew that you meant what you said. Same thing happens in boundaries. Stop moving them around. Because when you do, there is no clear definition or direction. There is no clear definition or direction. And what do? They don't listen to a thing you say, because they're going to say, and I don't care if it's your veteran, I don't care if it's your boss, I don't care if you are the boss and it's your employees, I don't care if it's your children, I don't care if it's your friends, I don't care if it's your church group, I don't care who it is, but when you tell somebody, no, I'm not going to do this, here's my boundary, and you do it anyway, even though it may punish yourself in a way, or you feel like that, and you do it anyway, you're now enabling them to do whatever. They know you're not going to enforce things, so they don't take you seriously. And now they've learned to manipulate you, because this is what they're going to say. This is what they're going to say. You're going to have this little banquet at the church or wherever, and you've got too much going on in your life, and you just can't cook this time. You may have always cooked, you may have done it in the past, you may have put on I was on a committee to put on a fireworks show and have a festival, and I stepped down and I said, look, I can't do this. And y'all, my phone was blowing up even this year. How did you do this? I stopped. Because what happens is that when you do it and you go back and do it anyway, you haven't given them a boundary. So now, oh, you're the chairman, but I'm going to do all the work. So I'm now enabling you not to be accountable. And now you're calling me 3 years later because you can't do something. And now what happens? You've manipulated me. And that's the spiral. That's the way the circle works. I've said this 1,000 times. For every action, there's a reaction. Sometimes it's negative, sometimes it's positive. When you initially set that boundary, when you initially set that boundary, it is hard to maintain. I go back to my kids and you can't drive. Not only did I tell my kids they couldn't drive, they couldn't ride to school with their friends because they tried that. Their buddies were coming to pick them up. Nope. That big yellow thing that rides around, that comes and picks everybody up, you're going to ride that to school. Do you know what it's like being a senior in high school? Riding, as they put it, the big yellow cheese? They rode the big yellow cheese. But you know how many times they rode the big yellow cheese? Once. Well, however long their punishment was. But one time. I didn't have to tell them again because they knew. And look, I'm just one of these great parents. I firmly believed you had to walk your children to the bus stop. I walked them when they were little to the bus stop. I walked them to the bus stop when they were seniors. Sometimes my hair was in a towel. Sometimes I was in my sweatpants and my t-shirt and I walked them out there. And all their friends got to see their mama standing out there with her hair in a towel and her sweatpants on. I went to school with them when they misbehaved in class. My teachers were teaching this. Well, you know what? I'm going to come sit in class with you. My ex-husband did that too with them. Okay, I mean, that was one thing that he was great at. But he didn't just go like I went. Y'all, he wore combat boots, a pair of athletic shorts that were red and white striped, and a shirt that says disco sucks or I love disco that was 2 sizes too small. And he sat down next to them in class. Well, you know, it's our job to sit in class with you. And if this is what you're saying is going on, we're going to find out. So we went. Those were boundaries. And they were tough boundaries to do. But let me tell you, when you do them and you practice them and they learn there's no moving of those, there's no movement there in those boundaries that you're not going to enable anymore by moving, then the manipulation comes to an end too. It is a cycle. And if you think they're not going to push back about boundaries, you're wrong, because they will. They'll push back about them every time. And that is what happens with boundaries, enabling, and manipulation. So today, as I'm over my little 30 minutes here, y'all take a deep breath today. You want to communicate with your veteran? This will blow their mind. Go into your veteran, hand them 2 or 3 little cards. Tell them, hi, write down a boundary for me. Write down a boundary for me. Nikki, it might be me. Write down a boundary for me. Something that is a boundary that you have that you don't want me to cross. 2, no more than 3. You can start with 1 if you want. Then however many you give them, you do the same number. You find out what they are and you hang them up there. Start living by them, because when you move those boundaries, you become an enabler. When you move those boundaries, you become an enabler. And I'll tell you something else. It's not just for you. These boundaries are not just for them to remind them of what they are. They're to remind you of the boundaries you set. Hang them up there. Because when you learn to live by those boundaries, and they're written out, they're clear. Like, my bath time is my bath time. Don't bother me. They're clear boundaries. Thank you. I'm glad. See, I'm home. It's much better. those boundaries are clear. Stop moving them, because when you move them, you are an enabler. And when you keep moving your boundaries and become an enabler, they learn to become a manipulator. An enabler, when you enable people, they become a manipulator. And that's how the cycle works. That's how it works. So I'm ended on that today. Home, kind of get myself, my boundaries, my stuff back together. Tonight, do not forget, Let's Talk, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. It is an event on the page. Join us then. We have so much going on. We're going to share a lot about what's going on and kind of get everybody talking. And this is your place to vent, your place to talk, your place to share, our place to laugh. We spend more time laughing. A lot of times we hear some deep stuff. We had a veteran share with us last week that was absolutely amazing. And I was so proud of that veteran for sharing with us. And it was amazing. But before that, we were laughing. We were in stitches. We just had such a good time. But we truly become like a family on there, and they feel that they can open up. And again, I will put this out, and it will be clearly noted again. When we do Let's Talk is not recorded. No portion of that can be recorded by us or by anybody who is watching it. We're not going to do it. It's not going to go out there in public. Just want y'all to know that. All right, y'all. I'm out of here. I have a list to do now that I've gotten back. I am Stacy. This has been Walking in My Shoes. We are loving my veteran. Y'all have a blessed day. We will see you tonight. Bye.